I asked my best friend to marry me, as a joke. She didn't laugh. She looked at me like I had just changed her life. And then she said, "I thought you'd never ask." There are moments in life that feel small when they happen, a sentence you don't think through, a laugh you expect in return, a second you believe will pass like any other. But sometimes, those seconds stretch. They settle. They rewrite everything you thought you understood about the people closest to you. Have you ever said something you didn't mean, only to realize someone else heard it as everything they've ever hoped for? Because that's exactly what happened to Daniel that night. And what he didn't realize, was that this wasn't a joke to her. It never was. But what I didn't realize, was how long she had been waiting. Or how much I had already lost, without knowing it. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The strange thing about love, is that it doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it sits quietly in the background of your life, waiting for you to notice it. Daniel and Emma met when they were 14. It was the kind of friendship that didn't need effort. Same bus stop, same jokes, same habit of sitting in silence without it feeling awkward. She remembered everything about him, the way he liked his coffee, the songs he pretended not to like but always played twice, the way he shut down whenever life got overwhelming. He, on the other hand, never really thought about it. To him, Emma was just there. Constant. Reliable. Safe. Do you have someone like that in your life right now? Someone who shows up for you, no matter what, and you've just come to expect it? Years passed. College came and went. Jobs, relationships, breakups. Daniel dated other women. Emma listened. Always listened. Late night calls, long walks, quiet reassurance. She never crossed the line. Never made things uncomfortable. But there were moments, small ones, where something unspoken slipped through. Like the time he told her, "I don't know what I'd do without you," and she paused just a second too long before replying, "You won't have to find out." Or the night she stayed on the phone until he fell asleep, even though she had an early shift the next morning. He never asked her to. She just stayed. 6 years later, everything still looked the same, at least on the surface. But under it, something had been quietly growing. The night it happened was ordinary. That's what made it so easy to miss. A small gathering at his apartment. A few friends, music playing low in the background, half-empty glasses on the table. Emma sat across from him, laughing at something someone said, her eyes occasionally drifting back to him like they always did. And then someone joked, "You two act like an old married couple." Daniel laughed. Without thinking, without pausing, without understanding the weight of what he was about to say, he turned to her and smiled. "Maybe we should just get married already." He expected her to roll her eyes. Maybe laugh. Maybe throw a sarcastic comment back at him. She didn't. She just looked at him. And in that look, everything changed. Have you ever seen someone react in a way that made you instantly regret what you just said? Because that's exactly what happened to Daniel. Her smile faded, not completely, but just enough. Her eyes softened in a way he had never seen before. And then she said it. "I thought you'd never ask." The room didn't go silent. The music was still playing. People were still talking. But for Daniel, everything stopped. He laughed. Nervously. "Wait, no, I was kidding." And just like that, something in her eyes shifted again. "Of course you were," she said, forcing a smile this time. "I know. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same laugh, the same comfort, the same ease. It was the kind of smile people use when they're trying to hide something they don't want anyone to see. And here's the part that stays with you. He knew it. Right in that moment, Daniel knew something had gone wrong. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But quietly, in a way that felt harder to fix. Would you have said something different if you realized what that moment meant? The night ended like any other. People left. Music stopped. Lights turned off. Emma hugged him at the door like she always did. But this time, she held on just a second longer. "I'm glad you said it," she whispered. And before he could respond, she pulled away. 3 days passed. No calls. No texts. No random memes or late-night check-ins. For the first time in years, Emma wasn't there. At first, he told himself it was nothing. People get busy. Life happens. But then a week passed. And something started to feel off. Think about the last time someone who was always there for you suddenly disappeared. Did you notice right away, or only when the silence became too loud to ignore? Daniel started reaching out. "Hey, you okay?" No response. "Did I say something weird the other night?" Still nothing. It wasn't like her. Emma always replied. Always showed up. Always made space for him. Until now. 2 weeks later, he finally saw her. By accident. A grocery store, of all places. She was standing near the checkout, holding a basket, her hair tied back the way she used to do when she was tired. For a second, it felt like nothing had changed. He walked up to her. "Emma." She turned. And for the first time since he met her, she hesitated before smiling. "Hey." It was polite. Careful. Distant. "Where have you been?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Just busy," she said. Busy. That word felt wrong coming from her. "You've been busy for 2 weeks?" She looked down at her hands. Then back at him. "I think. I just needed some space." "From me?" Another pause. "From what I thought you meant." That's when it hit him. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic realization. But slowly, like something settling into place. All those moments. All those conversations. All the time she stayed when she didn't have to. It wasn't just friendship. It never was. "Did you know?" he asked quietly. She smiled again, but this time, it wasn't forced. "I think a part of you did," she said. And maybe she was right. Because suddenly, everything made sense in a way it never had before. But here's where the story turns. Because realization doesn't always come in time. And understanding something too late can feel heavier than never knowing at all. 6 months later. That's how long it took for Daniel to finally admit the truth to himself. He missed her. Not just as a friend. Not just as someone who was always around. He missed her in a way that made everything else feel incomplete. He tried dating again. Tried filling the silence she left behind. But every conversation felt shallow. Every connection felt temporary. Because none of them knew him the way she did. None of them stayed the way she did. So one night, he made a decision. He went to her apartment. Knocked on the door. And waited. When she opened it, everything he had rehearsed in his head disappeared. She looked different. Not physically. But emotionally. Stronger. Calmer. Like someone who had finally made peace with something. "I need to talk to you," he said. She nodded. Let him in. And for a moment, it almost felt like old times. "I wasn't joking," he said finally. She didn't respond. "I mean, I thought I was. But I wasn't. Not really. Still nothing. I didn't see it before. I didn't understand what you meant to me. But I do now." Her eyes softened, just slightly. "And what do I mean to you now?" she asked. He took a breath. "Everything." Silence filled the room. And then, she shook her head. "I waited for you," she said quietly. "For years." He felt it in his chest. "I know." "No," she said. "You don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't have waited until now." That was the moment. The turning point. The realization that sometimes, love isn't enough if it arrives too late. "I needed you then," she continued. "Not now. Would you have made the same mistake? Would you have waited until the person who loved you stopped waiting for you?" Daniel stood there, with nothing left to say. Because for the first time, he understood exactly what he had lost. And this time, there was no joke to hide behind. No second chance waiting quietly in the background. Just the truth. Some people walk into your life and give you everything, without asking for anything in return. And if you're not careful, you'll only realize their worth the moment they decide to stop. Emma didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she finally chose herself. And Daniel. He carried that moment with him. Not as regret. But as a reminder. To pay attention. To listen. To recognize the quiet ways people show up for you, before it's too late. So let me ask you something. Who in your life has been there all along, waiting for you to finally see them? And more importantly, will you realize it in time? Or will you only understand their value, after they're gone? I met Emma on a Tuesday morning that neither of us even wanted to be part of. Freshman year. New school. That awkward phase where everyone is pretending they know who they are, but nobody actually does. I remember walking into class late, trying not to draw attention, and the only empty seat left was right next to her. She looked up, half-smiled, and said, "You're lucky." I was about to claim this spot for my bag. I laughed, sat down, and whispered, "I would have fought your bag for it." She raised an eyebrow and said, "You'd lose." That was it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just a simple moment, that somehow turned into everything. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. From that day on, it just clicked. You know when you meet someone and there's no effort? No overthinking what to say, no trying to impress them, no awkward silences that feel heavy. That was us. Conversations flowed like we'd known each other for years. We'd argue about random things like which movie endings made no sense, or why pineapple on pizza was either genius or completely unacceptable. And somehow, those little arguments turned into inside jokes that only we understood. "You'd lose" became a thing. Anytime one of us doubted the other, we'd say it. Quietly. Like a code. Have you ever had that kind of connection with someone, where the smallest words carry the biggest meaning? Because that's what it felt like. We started sitting together every day. Then walking to the bus stop together. Then texting. Then calling. And before I even noticed it happening, Emma became the first person I told everything to. Not just the big things. The small things too. The annoying coworker. The random thought at 2 a.m. The song that hit a little too hard for no reason. She was just there for all of it. And the strange part? I never questioned it. It felt normal. Like this was just how life worked. Like everyone had someone like Emma. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. There was this one night, about a year after we met, when everything felt different, but I didn't have the awareness to understand why. I had just gone through a rough breakup. Nothing dramatic, just one of those endings where things quietly fall apart. I remember sitting on my bed, staring at my phone, debating whether to call her or just deal with it on my own. Before I could decide, my phone rang. It was her. I know that silence, she said the second I picked up. What happened? And I remember thinking, how does she always know? We talked for hours that night. Not just about the breakup, but about everything. Fears. Plans. The kind of future we thought we wanted. At one point, there was this long pause, and she said softly, "You deserve someone who sees you the way I do." I laughed it off. Yeah? And how do you see me? Another pause. Better than you see yourself. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. Because it was easier that way. It was easier to label it as friendship. To keep things simple. To avoid asking questions that might complicate something that already felt perfect. And that's the thing about us. We were perfect, as long as we didn't look too closely. People noticed, though. They always do. Are you guys together? We heard it all the time. Friends, classmates, even strangers sometimes. There was this one time we went to a cafe, and the waiter automatically split the bill and said, "For the couple." Emma smiled. I corrected him. "We're just friends." He nodded, but gave us that look. You know the one. Like he didn't believe it for a second. Emma didn't say anything until we left. "Just friends, huh?" she said, teasing. "Obviously," I replied. She smiled. Obviously. But there was something in the way she said it. Not bitter. Not sad. Just quiet. Have you ever brushed off something important, because acknowledging it would force you to change something you weren't ready to lose? That's what we were doing. Choosing comfort over clarity. Choosing what felt safe, over what might have been real. Time kept moving. Life kept happening. But no matter what changed around us, one thing stayed the same. Emma was still there. Birthdays. Bad days. Good news. Random Tuesdays. She showed up for all of it. Not loudly. Not for recognition. Just consistently. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I let her. Without ever asking myself why. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. Because as long as we didn't define it, we didn't have to risk losing it. And maybe you've done that too. Maybe there's someone in your life right now, someone who feels easy, familiar, constant. Someone you've never really stopped to question, because having them there feels too important to risk. So let me ask you. If everyone around you can see something you refuse to acknowledge, does that make it untrue? Or does it just mean, you're not ready to face it yet? For a long time, nothing really changed, at least not in a way we were willing to admit. Life kept moving forward, and naturally, so did we. New people came into our lives. New relationships. New routines. On the surface, it looked healthy, normal even. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You meet someone, you date, you try to build something real. And I did. I met someone through work. She was kind, driven, easy to talk to. It made sense. Everything about it made sense. So I told myself, this is good. This is what moving forward looks like. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt wrong. I remember the first time Emma met her. We were all sitting at dinner, laughing, sharing stories. Nothing unusual. But there was this moment, small, almost invisible, where Emma went quiet. Not completely. Just enough that if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. She smiled when she was supposed to. She laughed at the right times. But it didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. "She's great," Emma said later that night when it was just the two of us. "Yeah, she is," I replied. Another pause. "I'm happy for you," she added. And I believed her. Or at least, I wanted to. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. Because acknowledging it would have meant asking questions neither of us was ready to answer. And then, things started to shift. Not all at once. Not in a way you could point to and say, that's where it changed. It was gradual. Subtle. But undeniable if you were honest with yourself. Emma started seeing someone too. She mentioned him casually at first. I met this guy, like it didn't mean much. Like it was just another passing thing. And I reacted the way a friend should. That's good, I said. What's he like? He's consistent, she replied. Consistent. It was such a simple word, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt wrong. The first real moment I felt it was a Saturday. We had plans. Nothing special. Just our usual routine. Coffee, a walk, maybe sitting somewhere talking about nothing and everything at the same time. But that morning, she texted. Hey, can we reschedule? I'm going out with him today. That was it. A normal message. A reasonable request. So why did it feel like something had just shifted in a way I couldn't explain? Yeah, of course, I replied. Have fun. And I meant it. At least, part of me did. But the rest of me sat there, staring at my phone longer than necessary. Rereading the message. Not because of what she said, but because of how it felt. Have you ever had someone you couldn't lose, but also couldn't have? That's where things started to get complicated. Because nothing was wrong. There were no arguments. No dramatic moments. No clear reason to feel the way I was feeling. And yet, something was off. The calls became less frequent. Not gone. Just spaced out. The long conversations turned into shorter check-ins. I'll call you later started to mean maybe tomorrow, and sometimes, not at all. And every time it happened, I told myself the same thing. It's normal. People get busy. This is what happens when life moves forward. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt wrong. Then there were the moments that didn't make sense unless you looked at them closely. Like the night I canceled on her. It wasn't even a big reason. Just dinner plans with the girl I was seeing. I texted Emma, expecting her usual response. No worries, we'll catch up later. Instead, she replied with something simple. Okay. No emoji. No follow-up. Just, okay. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. Later that night, I found myself checking my phone more than usual. Waiting for something that never came. A message. A joke. Anything. Nothing. And that silence felt louder than it should have. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. Because if we admitted what those moments meant, we'd have to confront something we weren't ready to face. Jealousy doesn't always look the way you expect it to. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always come with anger or confrontation. Sometimes, it shows up in the quiet moments. In the pauses. In the things you don't say. Like the way I started asking more questions than usual. So, what did you guys do today? Oh, just went out, she'd say. Where? She'd tell me. And it was good? Yeah. It was good. Simple answers. Nothing wrong with them. But I kept asking anyway. Not because I needed to know. But because something inside me wasn't settling. And she noticed. You ask a lot about him, she said one night. I laughed it off. Just making conversation. She didn't push it. But the look she gave me said she didn't believe that for a second. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt wrong. And it wasn't just me. There were moments where Emma would act different too. Like the time I mentioned going away for the weekend with the girl I was dating. "That sounds nice," she said. But her voice was quieter than usual. "You should have fun," she added. I nodded. "Yeah. I will." But there was this strange feeling, like I had just said something I wasn't supposed to. Like I had crossed a line that had never been spoken out loud. That's the thing about denial. It doesn't mean you don't feel something. It just means you refuse to name it. And as long as you don't name it, you can pretend it doesn't exist. But it does. It shows up in the way you hesitate before saying certain things. In the way you notice changes that shouldn't matter, but do. In the way someone's absence suddenly feels heavier than it used to. Have you ever caught yourself missing someone, while they're still in your life? That's where we were. Still there. Still talking. Still pretending. But slowly, something was slipping. Not all at once. Just enough to feel it, if you were paying attention. And maybe that was the problem. We were paying attention. Just not enough to be honest about what we were seeing. That if you looked at us from the outside during that time, you'd probably think we were drifting apart. Different relationships, different schedules, different priorities. And for a while, it really did feel like that. There would be stretches where we barely talked. Days turning into weeks. Conversations becoming shorter, less frequent. It felt like we were slowly becoming strangers. But then something would happen. It was never planned. Never forced. Just one small moment that pulled everything back together again. An argument. A misunderstanding. A random message sent at the wrong time, or maybe the right time, depending on how you look at it. And suddenly, we were right back where we started. Have you ever had someone like that, where no matter how far things seem to go, you somehow find your way back to each other? Because that's exactly what we were. It started becoming a pattern. We'd get distant. Life would get in the way. Or maybe we'd let it. Then one of us would reach out. "Hey, can we talk?" And just like that, everything else faded into the background. There was this cafe we used to go to. Nothing special. Slightly too loud, coffee that was just okay, chairs that were never really comfortable. But it became our place. Not because of what it was, but because of what happened there. Every important conversation somehow led us back to that same spot. Arguments. Apologies. Laughter that felt like relief after holding your breath too long. Looking back, it almost felt scripted. Like no matter what direction life pulled us in, we were always meant to end up sitting across from each other at that same table. No matter who we dated, we always found our way back. That's what I used to tell myself. And at the time, it felt comforting. Like no matter what changed, some things stayed the same. But comfort can be misleading. Because just because something repeats, doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes it just means, you haven't learned what you're supposed to yet. The arguments were never loud. That's what made them harder to understand. They weren't explosive or dramatic. Just quiet tension. Small misunderstandings that carried more weight than they should have. Like the time she said, "You've changed." And I laughed. Everyone changes. She shook her head. "Not like this." "What do you mean?" But she didn't answer. She just looked at me, like she was trying to decide whether it was worth explaining. And then she said, "Never mind." But it wasn't never mind. It was everything, just unspoken. We'd sit there in silence for a few seconds too long. Both of us feeling it. Neither of us willing to name it. And then one of us would break the tension. A joke. A memory. something safe. And just like that, we'd reset. Back to normal. Back to familiar. Back to pretending. Almost like something was pulling us together. And maybe that sounds comforting at first. Like fate. Like connection. Like something deeper than coincidence. But let me ask you something. What if it wasn't something pulling us together? What if it was something we refused to let go of? There's a difference. And we didn't understand it at the time. Because every time we came back to each other, it felt right. Easy. Like slipping into something that already fit. There was this one night in particular that stayed with me. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 weeks. No real reason. Just distance that grew quietly over time. And then out of nowhere, she texted. "Are you free?" That was it. No explanation. No context. I replied almost immediately. Yeah. An hour later, we were sitting at the cafe. Same table. Same routine. Different energy. At first, we didn't say much. Just small talk. Safe topics. Avoiding the obvious question hanging in the air. Why now? Why here? Why again? Finally, I asked, "Why did you call me?" She looked down at her cup, tracing the edge with her finger. "I don't know," she said. I nodded. But I knew that wasn't true. She always knew. "You just felt like the only person I could talk to," she added. And there it was. That familiar feeling. The one that made everything else fade away. At the time, it felt like proof. Proof that what we had was different. Stronger. Unbreakable. But deep down, there was another thought. A quieter one. What if we were just stuck? Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. Because it was easier to believe in the idea that we'd always find our way back, than to question why we kept leaving in the first place. The truth is, patterns don't just appear out of nowhere. They form because something is unresolved. Something unfinished. Something both people feel, but neither one is willing to confront. And that was us. 2 people, circling the same truth over and over again. Getting close enough to feel it. But never close enough to say it out loud. But neither of us was ready to admit why. And maybe you've experienced something like that too. A connection that keeps returning. A person who never fully leaves your life, no matter how much time passes. It feels meaningful. It feels important. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself? Is it real connection? Or just unfinished emotion? Because sometimes, the reason you keep finding your way back to someone isn't because you're meant to be together. It's because neither of you had the courage to end what was never clearly defined in the first place. That it happened on a night that didn't feel important at first. No big plans. No special occasion. Just one of those quiet evenings where everything slows down a little. I remember it was past midnight when my phone lit up. Emma. I stared at it for a second, longer than I usually would. Then I answered. Hey. Her voice was softer than usual. Not sad. Not happy. Just tired. Hey, I replied. You okay? A small pause. Yeah. I just couldn't sleep. That wasn't unusual. We'd had conversations like this before. Late-night talks that stretched into early mornings. The kind where people say things they don't usually say during the day. But something felt different this time. We talked about nothing at first. Random things. A show she was watching. Something that happened at work. The usual routine. But underneath it, there was something else. Something quieter. Waiting. Have you ever felt a conversation shifting, before anything actually changes? Because that's what it felt like. Like we were slowly moving towards something neither of us had planned, but both of us could feel. The pauses started getting longer. The words started meaning more. And then, she said it. Do you ever think about us? It wasn't dramatic. She didn't emphasize it. She just asked it, like it had been sitting in her mind for a long time. I didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, I didn't have an automatic response. What do you mean? I asked. Another pause. I don't know, she said. Just, everything. Everything. Such a simple word. But in that moment, it carried years of unspoken thoughts. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt different. I mean, she continued, her voice quieter now, don't you think it's a little strange? What is? That no matter what happens, we always end up back here. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Yeah. I've thought about that. And? That one word felt heavier than anything else she had said. Because now, there was no avoiding it. No joke to hide behind. No easy way out. Just the truth, waiting. I think, I started. And then I stopped. Because suddenly, everything felt too real. Every memory. Every moment. Every time we ignored what was right in front of us. It all came rushing in at once. And for a second, I almost said it. I almost told her. But instead, I hesitated. Have you ever been right on the edge of saying something that could change everything, and then pulled back at the last second? Because that's exactly what happened. I think we're just used to each other, I said finally. The words came out flat. Safe. Wrong. Silence followed. Not the comfortable kind we were used to. This one lingered. Too long. Heavy in a way that made it hard to breathe. And I knew, immediately. That wasn't the answer she was hoping for. She didn't respond right away. And in that silence, there was something unspoken. Something fragile, slowly breaking. I guess, she said after a while. But her voice had changed. Just slightly. Enough to feel it. We both knew, that wasn't the truth. We just didn't say it. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But we ignored it. Because facing it would have meant risking everything we had built. The conversation didn't end there, but it never quite recovered either. We tried to steer it back to something normal. Something easy. But the tension stayed. Sitting there, between every word. And then, her phone rang. It was small. Almost insignificant. Just a sound cutting through the silence. She sighed lightly. I should take this, she said. Yeah, go ahead. Another pause. I'll call you back. Okay. But something in the way she said it felt uncertain. Like even she didn't believe it. The call ended. And just like that, the moment was gone. No resolution. No clarity. Just silence. I stared at my phone for a while after that. Waiting. Thinking maybe she'd call back. Maybe we'd pick up where we left off. Maybe we'd say the things we were supposed to say. But she didn't. And I didn't either. That moment should have changed everything. But we let it slip. And here's the part that stays with you. It wasn't that we didn't feel it. It wasn't that we didn't understand what was happening. It was that we chose not to act on it. Because sometimes, the fear of losing what you have is stronger than the desire to find out what it could become. But let me ask you something. If you had been in that moment, would you have said it? Or would you have done exactly what we did? And let it pass, hoping it would come back again. Because not every moment does. After that night, something changed. Not in a way you could point to immediately. There was no argument. No clear ending. Just a quiet shift, like something had been said without actually being spoken. And from that point on, things didn't go back to what they were. At first, it was subtle. A missed call here. A delayed reply there. Conversations that used to stretch for hours, now ending after a few minutes. We still talked, but it felt different. Like we were both choosing our words more carefully. Avoiding certain topics. Skipping over things that used to come naturally. And then, she told me. I think this one's different, she said. I didn't have to ask what she meant. The way she said it, told me everything. She had met someone. Not casually. Not temporarily. Something real. Something steady. He's good to me, she added. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's good, I said. And I meant it. At least, part of me did. But the rest of me felt something I couldn't quite explain. At the time. I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt final. Have you ever heard someone say something, and instantly knew things were about to change in a way you couldn't stop? Because that's what that moment felt like. After that, everything shifted faster. She became harder to reach. Not unavailable, just less present. When we talked, it was lighter. Safer. Surface-level conversations about work, daily routines, things that didn't matter as much. The late-night calls disappeared. The long pauses filled with meaning, gone. Even her laughter felt different. Still there. Still real. But not shared in the same way it used to be. And I noticed it. Every single part of it. That's when I started to feel it. I was losing her. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just slowly, in ways that made it harder to react. Because what do you do when nothing is technically wrong, but everything feels different? You can't argue with it. You can't confront it. All you can do, is feel it happening. There was this one evening that made it undeniable. I called her. Nothing urgent. Just instinct. The way I used to. She picked up, but her voice was distracted. Hey, can I call you back? She said. Yeah, sure. I'm out with him right now. Him. It wasn't the first time she said it. But it was the first time it felt like something had replaced me. Okay, I replied. No problem. I'll call you later. Yeah. But I already knew. Later didn't mean the same thing anymore. And sure enough, she didn't call back that night. Or the next. And when she finally did, the conversation felt distant. Polite. Like we were catching up, instead of continuing something that had never needed catching up before. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But I didn't say anything. Because what could I say? Hey, I feel like I'm losing you. That didn't make sense. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just choosing her life. And for the first time, I wasn't at the center of it. Have you ever realized you've gone from being someone's priority to just an option? Not because they stopped caring, but because something else became more important? That realization doesn't come with a clear moment. It builds. Quietly. Until one day, you feel it completely. There was another night. I saw her, again by accident. Same cafe. Same place we always came back to. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was sitting across from him. Laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in a while. For a second. I just stood there. Watching. Not in a dramatic way. Just noticing. And that's when it hit me. Not as a thought, but as a feeling. Clear. Unavoidable. That's when I started to feel it. I was losing her. Because for the first time, she looked at someone else, the way she used to look at me. I didn't walk over. I didn't interrupt. I just left. And the entire way home, there was this question sitting in my mind. Louder than anything else. Would you say something, or stay silent? Because that was the choice now. Not later. Not eventually. Now. Say something, and risk everything. Or stay silent, and watch it slowly disappear. And the truth is, silence feels safer in the moment. It protects you from rejection. From awkwardness. From the possibility that you waited too long. But what it doesn't protect you from is regret. And I could feel it starting. Not all at once. But enough to know. If I didn't do something soon, I might lose her completely. It didn't happen in some dramatic setting. No storm outside. No raised voices. No moment that looked the way you'd expect something important to look. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. She called me. And for a second, I almost didn't pick up. Not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because something in me already knew this conversation wasn't going to feel the same. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she replied. Her voice was calm. Steady. But there was something underneath it. Something I couldn't quite place. We talked about nothing at first. Work. Small updates. The usual routine we had fallen into. And then, there was a pause. Not long. But long enough to feel it. "I think this might be the one." She said it so simply. So casually. Like she had already accepted it. And for a moment, I didn't respond. Because everything inside me just stopped. Have you ever heard something that didn't feel real at first, like your mind needed a second to catch up to what your heart already understood? Because that's what it felt like. I mean, I don't want to rush anything, she continued. But it feels different this time. Different. That word again. Only this time, it didn't feel distant. It felt final. And I sat there, holding the phone, trying to find the right thing to say. The supportive thing. The right friend response. That's good," I managed. And there it was again. That same sentence. The one I had used before. The one that sounded right, but never felt right. Silence followed. Not awkward. Just heavy. Because I think a part of her was waiting. Waiting for something else. Something real. Something honest. But I didn't give it to her. And that's when it hit me, too late. Not in a loud, overwhelming way. But in a quiet realization that settled into my chest and didn't leave. I wasn't losing her anymore. I had already lost her. Every moment I ignored. Every time I chose comfort over truth. Every time I told myself it didn't matter. This was where it led. To this exact conversation. Where she was telling me, she had found something real. With someone else. Have you ever realized your feelings at the exact moment it becomes too late to act on them? Because that realization doesn't come with clarity. It comes with regret. And the worst part? There's no one else to blame. The call ended shortly after that. Nothing dramatic. No long goodbye. Just a quiet ending to a conversation that changed everything. And for the next few weeks, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was the right thing to do. That she deserved to be happy. That I had missed my chance. So I stepped back. Gave her space. Watched from a distance. And tried to accept it. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, everything felt different. Then, 3 months later, she called again. But this time, her voice wasn't steady. Hey. Something was wrong. I could hear it immediately. What happened? I asked. A pause. A breath. And then. It didn't work out. Just like that. The thing that felt so certain, was over. No long explanation at first. No details. Just that one sentence. And I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Guilt? Confusion? All of it, at once. We met the next day. Same cafe. Same table. But nothing felt the same anymore. She looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone who had believed in something, and watched it fall apart. I really thought it was going to work, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. And for a moment, we just sat there. No jokes. No easy conversation. Just honesty. The kind we had avoided for years. I think I tried to force it, she continued. Like I wanted it to be right, even when it didn't feel right. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. Because for the first time, that's what she needed. Not distraction. Not comfort disguised as jokes. Just someone to hear her. And then, she said something I'll never forget. Something that stayed with me long after that moment passed. But what she said after that, I'll never forget. She looked at me. Really looked at me. The way she used to. And then she said, I think I was trying to replace something I never fully let go of. And just like that, everything came rushing back. Every moment we ignored. Every truth we avoided. Every chance we let slip. All of it, right there, in one sentence. And suddenly, this wasn't over. Not yet. Because now, the truth wasn't hidden anymore. It was right in front of us. Clear. Unavoidable. And for the first time, we couldn't pretend we didn't see it. After that conversation, we didn't make any big decisions. There was no moment where we said, let's try this, or let's finally figure this out. We just started talking again. But this time, it wasn't the same. Something had shifted, and we both felt it. It was in the way we looked at each other now. Before, eye contact was easy. Casual. Something that came and went without meaning much. But now, it lingered. Just a second longer than normal. Long enough to make you aware of it. Long enough to feel something underneath it. Have you ever looked at someone you've known for years, and suddenly felt like you were seeing them for the first time? Because that's what it was like. We went back to the cafe again. Same place. Same table. But it didn't feel like routine anymore. It felt intentional. Like we both knew this wasn't just another conversation. We talked, but differently. Slower. More careful. Every word felt like it carried weight now. Not heavy, just meaningful. Even the pauses had changed. Before, silence between us felt comfortable. Easy. Like there was nothing that needed to be said. But now, silence felt full. Like there were things sitting in it, waiting. And neither of us was rushing to fill it anymore. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But this time, we didn't ignore it. Not completely. Just enough to stay in it a little longer. I missed this, she said at one point. Her voice was soft. Honest. Me too, I replied. And there was something different about the way we said it. Before, those words would have been automatic. Now, they felt real. Like we actually understood what this meant. Not just the conversations. Not just the routine. But, each other. Have you ever gotten something back, only to realize it doesn't feel the same as before? Not worse. Just, deeper. That's what this was. We weren't pretending anymore. At least not completely. There were moments where the truth almost came out. You could feel it. Like it was sitting right there, just beneath the surface. Waiting. Like the way she asked more direct questions now. Do you ever think about things differently, now? I knew what she meant. But I still answered carefully. Sometimes. She nodded. Like she expected that answer. Like she knew I wasn't saying everything. And maybe she wasn't either. Because even though things had changed, fear was still there. Not loud. Not obvious. Just enough to make us hesitate. Just enough to keep us from crossing that final line. There was this one moment. We were sitting there, both quiet, both thinking about something we weren't saying. And she looked at me. Not quickly. Not casually. Just, fully. And for a second. Everything else faded. The noise around us. The people passing by. None of it mattered. It was just that look. And in it, there was something clear. Something honest. Something we had avoided for years. She opened her mouth, like she was about to say something. Something important. And I felt it. That same feeling from before. That moment right before everything changes. But this time, neither of us interrupted it. No phone ringing. No joke. No distraction. Just, a choice. And yet. She stopped. Closed her mouth. Looked down. And smiled slightly. Not because nothing was there. But because there was too much. Have you ever been so close to saying something, that it scares you? Because once you say it, there's no going back. That's where we were. Right on the edge. Again. But different this time. Because now, we both knew what was there. We just hadn't said it yet. And maybe that made it even more intense. Because every moment we spent together now felt like borrowed time. Like something was building toward a point we couldn't avoid forever. Something had shifted, and we both felt it. Not in a way we could explain. But in a way we couldn't ignore anymore. And the question wasn't whether things had changed. It was. What were we going to do about it this time? Because we had already seen what happens when you wait too long. And deep down, I think we both knew. We weren't going to get many more chances like this. That it was late. Not the kind of late where the world feels asleep, but the kind where everything slows down just enough for thoughts to get louder. We were standing on her balcony. The city stretched out in front of us, quiet in a way it never really is, just distant sounds blending into the background. A car passing. Faint music from somewhere down the street. The air was cool, carrying that familiar calm that only shows up at night. We had been talking for a while. Not about anything specific at first. Just letting the conversation move wherever it wanted to go. But eventually, like it always did, it found its way back to something real. Do you ever get tired of it? She asked. Of what? Relationships. I let out a small breath. Yeah, I said. Sometimes. She nodded, looking out into the distance. It's just exhausting, she continued. Starting over. Learning someone new. Explaining yourself again and again. There was no bitterness in her voice. Just honesty. I thought it was supposed to get easier, she added. Me too. And for a moment, we just stood there. Side by side. Not looking at each other. Just existing in the same space. Have you ever had a conversation that feels simple on the surface, but carries something much deeper underneath? Because that's what this was. We weren't just talking about relationships. We were talking about everything we had been through. Everything we had avoided. Everything that was still sitting there, unspoken. Looking back, that moment meant more than I realized. But this time, I didn't want to ignore it. Neither of us said anything for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. Like we were both thinking the same thing, just not saying it yet. And then, she broke it. At this point, she said quietly, almost to herself, "I should just marry my best friend." The words hung in the air. Not rushed. Not followed by anything else. Just there. And for a second, everything felt still. Like time slowed down just enough for the weight of what she said to settle. Have you ever heard something that sounds like a joke, but feels like the truth? Because that's exactly what it felt like. I turned slightly, looking at her. She wasn't looking at me. Still facing forward. Still calm. But there was something in the way she said it. Something real. And without thinking. Without pausing. Without understanding what I was about to set in motion. I spoke. "That doesn't sound like a bad idea." My voice was light. Almost playful. Like I was matching her tone. Like it was just another joke. But inside, something shifted the moment the words left my mouth. I didn't think before I said it. And the second it was out there, I felt it. That same feeling. That same edge. The one we had reached so many times before. Only this time, there was no distraction. No interruption. Just silence. And the realization that this moment was different, that I didn't plan it. Not really. Not like this. But somehow, words slipped out of me before I could stop them. The city lights stretched behind her, flickering softly against the balcony railing, and I found myself leaning closer, heart racing, voice quieter than usual. "Marry me." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unyielding. For a moment, nothing. Silence so thick it almost had weight. Not a laugh. Not a joke. Not the playful teasing that usually followed our impulsive statements. Just silence. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And that's when I noticed the change. The way her eyes shifted, darting somewhere beyond me. Her lips pressed together in a way I'd never seen before. Her hands gripping the railing like she needed support. Her breathing, shallow, uneven, betraying a tension she didn't try to hide. It wasn't rejection. Not exactly. But it wasn't excitement either. Something was off. And in that moment, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the quiet, in the way time seemed to pause between us. Every instinct screaming that this wasn't just a fleeting reaction. It was deeper. Messier. A truth neither of us was ready to face, yet. I waited. Holding my breath. Hoping. Hoping for the smile I wanted, the laugh, the playful tease, anything that would make this feel like one of our old moments. But she didn't move. She didn't respond. She just looked at me, and in that look, I saw everything we had avoided, everything we had hidden, everything we had told ourselves didn't exist. And I realized, the words I had said, the moment I had created, had exposed something neither of us could ignore anymore. For a moment, the silence stretched on. Long enough for me to wonder if I had completely misread everything. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat echoing louder than the city around us. And then, she spoke. "I thought you'd never ask." Her voice was quiet. Steady. But beneath it, there was relief. Joy. A kind of truth that had been buried for years. And suddenly, it all hit me. The weight of years of late-night talks, the pattern of always finding each other again, the jealousy we ignored, the arguments that pulled us apart only to bring us back, it all made sense now. Every inside joke, every long pause, every small glance that lingered too long, everything clicked. I could see it clearly in my mind, the balcony nights, the cafe meetings, the silent arguments, the almost confessions, every moment that had once felt confusing, now perfectly aligned. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't doubt. We weren't confused. We were just afraid. Afraid of losing what we had, afraid of ruining it by admitting the truth, afraid of confronting feelings that were bigger than either of us wanted to handle. But in that single sentence, all of it evaporated. Fear dissolved into clarity. And I finally understood, the entire time, we had known. We just hadn't dared to act on it. Until now, just when I thought the moment couldn't get more intense, she took a breath and looked me in the eyes. "You know," she said softly, almost a whisper, "I almost told you years ago." I froze. "What?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She nodded. "Back then. I thought I couldn't risk it. I was seeing someone else briefly, but I turned him down. Not because of him. Because of you. I realized, you were always it for me." Her words hit me like a wave. Every memory, every misstep, every argument and late-night conversation suddenly had a new meaning. "You were always it for me," she repeated, slower this time. Letting it sink in. I swallowed hard. "Then, why didn't you say anything?" Her eyes softened, glistening just slightly in the dim light. "Because I was scared. Scared of losing what we already had. Our friendship, it was everything to me. I didn't want to risk it. And I thought, maybe you didn't feel the same." And just like that, every missed opportunity, every hesitation, every almost confession became understandable. It wasn't indifference. It wasn't doubt. It was fear. Fear that admitting the truth could destroy something irreplaceable. And now, years later, standing on this balcony, that fear had finally given way to clarity. But the weight of it lingered. All the what-ifs suddenly mattered. And yet, it felt right. Because finally, we weren't afraid anymore, after everything, after years of almosts, pauses, and missed moments, we finally said it. Not as a joke. Not as a test. Not as something half-meant. We decided to try. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't magical in a way that erased the past. We both knew the risks. We knew that stepping forward meant vulnerability. That it could fail. That we could stumble. Yet somehow, that didn't feel frightening anymore. Because the truth we'd both been holding for years was finally out in the open. And that alone, made it worth it. I looked at her that night and realized something. Some love stories don't start with sparks. They don't begin with fireworks or perfect timing. They start quietly. Slowly. With silence, and years of almosts. And in that silence, and in all those almosts, we had found each other anyway. Looking back, I realize now, the greatest love doesn't always arrive out of nowhere. Sometimes, it's been there all along. Waiting quietly. Hiding in plain sight. Sitting beside you during late-night talks, laughing at inside jokes, listening when no one else would. Sometimes, the person you're looking for has already been in your life the whole time. And that's the hardest part to recognize. Because it asks something of you. It asks courage. It asks honesty. It asks, whether you're willing to risk everything you have, for a chance at what you've always wanted. So I have to ask you, what would you do? Would you risk a friendship, for love? Think about that. Really think about it. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone you can't stop thinking about, or made you reflect on the chances you've almost taken, like and subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because sometimes, all it takes is one story to make you realize what's been there all along.